13 years of marriage ended with an email, a single PDF attachment in my inbox, received while I was still deployed in the desert, shattered everything I thought I had. My name is Ryan Briggs. I'm 42 years old, and I serve as a staff sergeant with the 82nd Airborne. I had been stationed in Kandahar for 4 months when Becky, my wife, decided she was done waiting for me to return. The subject line of her message read, "Let's be adults about this." The message itself was brief, just 3 sentences. She had already filed for divorce, emptied our joint accounts, and moved her new boyfriend, Jeremy, into our house in Spokane. I stared at the screen for a long moment, read the email twice, and then closed my laptop. I went to the communal showers, washed myself in silence, got dressed for my shift, and didn't speak to a soul. That night, when I returned to my bunk, I opened my laptop again and replied with a single word, "Understood." No argument, no pleading, no threats. Wilson, my bunkmate, glanced up from his book. "You good, man?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, not pressing. In the military, you learn to give each other space when it's needed. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. 6 months before deployment, I began noticing subtle changes. Becky had stopped asking about my day, started staying late at her job at the dental office, and began going to the gym more often, but never seemed to break a sweat. New clothes appeared in her closet, new friends whose names I didn't recognize, and new passwords on her phone. I didn't confront her about it. I'm not the type to check someone's messages or follow their every move. But I'm also not blind. Quietly, I began preparing for what I could already feel coming. I moved important documents, our marriage license, birth certificates, the deed to the house, which, thanks to a VA loan, was only in my name, and my military benefits paperwork, into a storage unit across town. I also took a few things that mattered to me, like my grandfather's watch and my mother's silverware. I opened a new bank account at a different bank and diverted a portion of my paycheck there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make sure I wasn't left with nothing if things went sideways. The night before I deployed, Becky hugged me at the airport. "Stay safe." "Okay," she said. Her voice was steady, her eyes dry. She seemed more like she was saying goodbye to a colleague than to her husband, who was about to head off to a war zone. Part of me knew something was off right then, but another part of me still hoped I was wrong. I boarded the plane with a sinking feeling in my stomach, unsure whether I'd return to a home or to ruins. The deployment itself was its own grind, dust storms, sleepless nights, endless patrols. But that email topped it all, hitting harder than any rocket attack ever could. Still, I stayed focused. In Kandahar, if you let your guard down, it's not just your bank account that you'll lose. I tried not to imagine her and Jeremy on my couch, watching my TV. I tried not to picture him feeding my dog or drinking from my coffee mug. But the mind is a cool way of projecting its worst fears, especially when you're alone under desert stars with nothing but time and silence. And the betrayal? It was louder than any explosion in the distance. The next few days blurred together with drills, duties, and routines. I felt like a ghost among the living, disconnected from everything and everyone. I found myself withdrawing from the usual banter, from the jokes that helped make the long days bearable. I volunteered for extra shifts, took longer patrols, anything to keep my mind away from the collapsing world I had left back home. Wilson noticed, but didn't push. Every morning, he left a cup of coffee on my footlocker. A small, simple gesture, but it meant more to me than he could know. In Kandahar, brotherhood isn't always spoken aloud, but it's there, in the small acts, the silent support. By the end of the week, I started writing. At first, it was just a log, dates, names, bank statements, timestamps from security footage. But eventually, it became something more. I began documenting everything. The first moment I noticed something was wrong, the signs I had ignored, the decisions I had made. It wasn't therapy. It was preparation. Because if Becky thought I would just let her take everything without a fight, she didn't know me at all. 2 weeks after I received Becky's divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall, trying to choke down some stale food when my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Another withdrawal. This one for $88,500. I set my fork down and opened the banking app. The joint account, which had once held nearly $90,000, now had just $22.37. The $47,000 in savings was gone. I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me. Murphy, a guy from my unit, glanced over at me. "Bad news?" he asked. I quickly locked my phone. "Nah, just some account stuff," I replied, my voice flat, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Later that night, I called a bank from the phone center on base. The representative confirmed my worst suspicions. Becky had been moving money out of our account for weeks. Small withdrawals at first, then larger transfers starting the very day after I left for deployment. I hung up the phone and stood in the hallway, watching as other soldiers talked to their wives, kids, and parents back home. They were getting updates from the people they loved, while I stood there, alone, dealing with a complete unraveling of my own life. That's when Wilson found me. He had a way of showing up at the right moment, even if he didn't know exactly what was going on. "I heard from Alvarez that you looked like you'd seen a ghost at dinner," he said, his voice calm but concerned. "My wife emptied our accounts," I replied, my voice tight with a strain of trying not to sound as broken as I felt. "Moved her boyfriend into our house. Sent me divorce papers while I was on patrol." Wilson didn't offer any sympathy or words of comfort. Instead, he simply nodded. "What's your plan?" "I'm not sure yet," I said, feeling more like a shell of a person than a man with any direction. He didn't push me to open up more, but he gave a simple nod. "Let me know if you need anything." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The email, the withdrawals, the image of them in my house, living the life I had worked so hard to build. But it wasn't just the money that hurt. It was a sense of betrayal, the feeling that someone who had once promised to stand by me through thick and thin was now standing on the other side of it all, with someone else. I opened my laptop and logged into the security system of the house, something I knew Becky had forgotten I could still access. There he was, Jeremy, walking our dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my Seahawk sweatshirt. And there was Becky, laughing in the kitchen that I had remodeled with my own hands, the kitchen I had put so much work into to make our house a home. Something inside me shifted then. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was colder, clearer, a resolve that had been buried beneath the hurt and disbelief. This was no longer just about a broken marriage. This was about making sure I didn't walk away with nothing. I grabbed my phone and made a list. Call James, Army buddy turned lawyer. Check the terms of the VA loan. Contact Master Sergeant about emergency leave. Review home refinance documents, something Becky had casually mentioned a year ago. Look into security for my pension accounts. At 0500, before my shift, I sent James an email. Need legal help. Discreet and urgent. He replied within the hour. Call me. Secure line only. After my shift, I stepped into a shaded corner near the SATCOM building, away from the hustle of the base. The desert wind howled as I dialed his number. The connection crackled for a moment before he picked up. "Ryan, you okay?" James asked, his voice familiar and steady. "Not really. Becky cleaned me out," I said, the weight of those words settling in. "Took everything and moved her new guy into our place." "Okay, first things first, we need to get ahead of this. I'm sending you a list of documents you'll need. Start gathering everything you can. We'll freeze whatever asset we can and file for an injunction." "Thanks, man. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "We served together. That bond doesn't expire." I let out a long breath and hung up. It was the first breath I had taken in days that didn't feel like shards of glass in my chest. I had a plan. I wasn't just going to let her take everything without a fight. Becky might have thought I was out of the picture, but I was just getting started. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, legal documents, and research. James had sent me a list of everything I needed to gather. Bank statements, credit card records, any emails or texts I had saved, proof of the joint accounts and their balance history, all of it. It felt like a mountain of paperwork, and I had to do it all while still trying to perform my duties in Kandahar. Every moment away from the grind was spent trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. I called my lawyer James almost every day, each conversation more focused than the last. We started putting the pieces in place, freezing bank accounts, securing my military benefits, and reviewing everything Becky and I had put in both our names. I kept finding more and more cracks in the life I thought I had. My own savings were gone, my retirement accounts were siphoned, and even my pension, something I had worked for over the years, was under threat. I had to act fast. In between all of this, there were moments when the weight of it all hit me. The overwhelming feeling of betrayal, the confusion of seeing everything I had worked for slip away in front of my eyes. I couldn't shake the image of Becky laughing with Jeremy, living in our house as if I had never existed. The house I had built with my own hands. The house where I had envisioned growing old with her. I was angry, sure, but that anger was tempered by a cold resolve. This wasn't just about getting revenge. This was about protecting myself, my future, and what was rightfully mine. And for the first time in weeks, I had a clear focus. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we had built without a fight. James kept pushing me to stay focused. This is bigger than the emotions, he told me one night over the secure line. You're not just fighting for money, Ryan. You're fighting for your future. You worked hard for everything you have. Don't let her walk away with it just because she's got someone new. That was the moment I realized James was right. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about my life. About the last 13 years of my service. About the sacrifices I had made. Every day I had spent away from home. Everything I had given up, all of it had led to this point. And now, I wasn't going to let her take it all away. I called the master sergeant the next day to request emergency leave. I explained the situation in as much detail as I could without going into too many personal details. He didn't ask many questions. In the military, you learn quickly that your personal life isn't always a priority, but when you're in combat, everything else tends to fade into the background. After a few days of waiting, I finally got the approval for leave. It wasn't much, just a short period to give me time to get things together. But it was enough. The first thing I did was book a flight back to Spokane. I wasn't sure what I'd find when I got there, but I knew I had to face it. I had to see it with my own eyes and take the first steps toward moving forward. The day before I left, I made one final call to James. I'm heading back home, I told him. I don't know what I'll be walking into, but I need you to make sure we're ready for whatever happens. He promised he'd be there every step of the way. Just make sure you take care of yourself. This is going to be a fight, but you're not in it alone. And then, just like that, I boarded the plane back to the States, the weight of the past 2 weeks pressing down on me. The further I got from Kandahar, the more I felt the familiar sting of my wounds. This was no longer just about a broken marriage. This was a battle for my dignity, my future, and everything I had worked for. I was ready to fight, no matter what it took. When I landed in Spokane, the feeling of stepping off a plane was surreal. The city was just as I remembered, bright, bustling, full of life, but everything felt different now. My home, my life, had been reduced to a battleground, and I wasn't sure where to begin. I made my way to the house, taking in the familiar streets, the memories that had once felt so comforting. When I pulled into the driveway, I could already see Jeremy's car parked out front. The sight of it sent a chill through me, but it also steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to let him, or Becky, take anything else from me. I took a deep breath, grabbed the documents I had prepared, and walked inside. This was just the beginning. The battle had only just started, and I wasn't going to let it end without a fight. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, and the sun streamed through the windows in the living room, casting long shadows across the floor. It almost felt like nothing had changed, but I knew better. Jeremy's car was still parked outside, and I could hear the faint sounds of voices coming from the kitchen. It didn't take much to guess what was going on in there. Becky, cooking breakfast, playing the part of the perfect girlfriend. The perfect life she had now built with someone else. I stood in the entryway for a moment, taking everything in. This was my home, the place where we had built our life together, and it felt like an alien landscape now. I took another breath, trying to steady myself. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let my emotions derail it. I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, and that's when I saw them. Becky, standing by the stove, her back to me, and Jeremy sitting at the kitchen table, his feet propped up casually on the chair opposite him. They didn't even notice me at first. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing through the silence. Becky's head snapped around, her eyes wide as if she hadn't expected to see me standing there. Her face went pale, and for a second she seemed lost for words. Jeremy, on the other hand, just looked at me and gave a half-hearted nod, clearly not concerned about my presence. "Ryan," Becky said, her voice almost a whisper, "what are you doing here?" "I live here," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "At least I did." Her eyes flickered briefly toward Jeremy, and then she turned back to face me. "I thought you were gone for good. The divorce papers were clear." "Yeah, well," I said, stepping further into the kitchen. "Turns out there's more to this than just signing some papers." Jeremy opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. "I'm not here for a fight," I said. "I'm here to make sure you both know exactly what you've taken from me. And I'm here to make sure you understand that this isn't over." Becky flinched, and I could see the guilt creeping across her face. But Jeremy? He didn't even flinch. He just sat there, staring me down like he was waiting for me to make a move. "I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I know you've emptied the accounts, moved my things, and set up your new life with Jeremy. But you don't get to do that without consequences. Not anymore." Becky opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at Jeremy, then back at me, and I could see the fear in her eyes now. It wasn't a fear of being caught. It was a fear of the unknown, of realizing that she might have underestimated me. "I've already contacted my lawyer," I continued, "and I'm freezing our joint accounts. I'm protecting my assets, Becky, and I'm going to make sure you don't get away with everything." Jeremy finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "You can't just take everything from her. She's entitled to." "She's entitled to what's fair," I interrupted. "And what's fair is that I won't let her walk away with everything I've worked for while she moves on to her new life without a second thought." Becky looked at Jeremy, her expression pleading. "Ryan, please, this isn't helping. We can figure this out without dragging everything into the open." I shook my head, feeling the weight of all the lies she had told me. "No, Becky, you had your chance to make this right. I'm done with the lies and the games." There was silence for a moment as Becky seemed to weigh her options, and I could see the realization dawn on her. This wasn't going to be as easy as she had thought. This wasn't going to be a quick divorce where she took everything and left me with nothing. "I'm not going to fight you over this," I said, my voice a little quieter now. "But you should know, I'm not just walking away. I'm going to make sure this is fair. And that means we're going to divide things the right way, not just the way you think is easiest for you." She nodded, the tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She couldn't, not after everything she had done. I turned to leave the kitchen, but then I paused. "By the way, I've already spoken to the bank. Any further withdrawals will be reported immediately." I left the kitchen and walked back toward the living room, feeling the eyes of both Becky and Jeremy on me. I knew this wasn't over, but it was a start. I wasn't going to let her take everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. As I stepped outside into the cool air, I realized something. I had been holding on to the past, hoping things could go back to how they were. But now, I understood the truth. Things would never be the same. And maybe that was for the best. I had a future to fight for, and this time, it wasn't going to be defined by the woman who had walked away from me. It was going to be defined by me, by my choices, my strength, and my determination to rebuild what had been taken from me. The court date came 6 months after I returned from deployment. 6 months of paperwork, strategy calls with James, and calculated restraint. Becky had hired a lawyer too, but unlike James, Hayes didn't have the benefit of 20 years of military service and a deep understanding of federal protections for servicemen. He was good, I'll admit that, but he underestimated just how prepared we were. I walked into the Spokane County Courthouse that morning in full dress uniform. Not to show off, but to remind the court and Becky of the years I'd given to this country while she built a new life behind my back. James met me at the steps with a calm nod and a folder stuffed with files, affidavits, financial statements, and a detailed timeline that dismantled Becky's narrative before she could even begin. Becky didn't look at me as we entered the courtroom. Jeremy wasn't there. He disappeared sometime after our confrontation, which didn't surprise me. He was never going to stick around for the ugly parts. He didn't sign up for that. Becky sat stiffly beside her attorney, eyes fixed forward, hands folded in her lap. The hearing took hours. Her lawyer tried to argue she was entitled to spousal support due to my steady income and pension potential. James countered with evidence of cohabitation with another partner, withdrawals made during deployment without consent, and even security footage we had retrieved, timestamp proof of Jeremy in the house weeks after she filed for divorce. Then came the property. The VA loan was in my name. James proved I'd been paying the mortgage, even while deployed. We produced documentation of my personal belongings being sold without permission, photographs, furniture, even heirlooms. It painted a clear picture. Becky wasn't just moving on, she was cashing out. The judge reviewed everything with a furrowed brow, occasionally glancing at me. At one point, he asked Becky directly, "Did you believe this arrangement was fair while your husband was in active combat deployment?" She hesitated. I didn't think he was coming back. That was all I needed to hear. In the end, the judgment was fair, but firm. The house remained mine. Becky was ordered to repay half of the unauthorized withdrawals. Jeremy had since vanished, but that didn't absolve her. The court denied her request for alimony, citing infidelity and misconduct. She kept her car, her personal items, and what remained in her accounts. I kept the dog, the house, and my dignity. After the gavel fell, I walked out of the courtroom feeling not victorious, but clear, lighter, like someone had finally lifted a 1,000-pound weight off my chest. James clapped me on the shoulder and offered a rare smile. "Told you," he said. "Stay disciplined, play it smart, and let the truth work." That night, I sat on my back porch with a beer in hand, and my dog curled at my feet. The house was quiet now, but it didn't feel empty. It felt mine again. The silence wasn't haunted anymore. It was peaceful. No more watching security cameras. No more guessing. Just space to breathe. I went back to work on base a week later. The guys welcomed me like I had just returned from a long patrol. Wilson grinned as he handed me a cup of coffee. "Back in one piece?" he asked. "Back and moving forward," I said. I didn't tell many people the whole story. Some things are better left in the past. But I did take one lesson with me, one I carry every day since. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. It hurts, yes. It shatters the illusions you thought were solid. But once the dust settles, you get to choose what's rebuilt. And this time, I'm building it all for me. No more false foundations. No more blind trust. Just a man, his dog, and a future he owns with both hands. The war ended. Not just overseas, but inside me too.